Hey guys, as the title of the video says, this video is will walk you through how to become a web developer in 2019. So welcome. That starts with the question, why even become a web developer, or why even bother to become a web developer? So there are many reasons why you would like to become a web developer, and these are some. So first thing I want to get out of my way is you don't need a degree. Web development is something that is growing right now, and more companies are accepting people and are accepting web developers that don't even have a degree. They are either self-taught or they go to a boot camp or they may have a degree as well. Um, that is also fine. Another reason why you would like to learn web development is it's a high-paying skill. Web development is growing day by day, and it's a very high-paying skill right now. There are more jobs in the market, and it's going to grow within the coming years. Web development is also creative. It's that if that's what you care about, it's a really it's a very creative skill or a job coming from a web developer. Um, you can easily freelance from anywhere in the world, so you can work from home and you can access many freelancing websites that will give you a task, and then you will get paid based on that task. So that's also possible. It's very beginner friendly. So it's not like embedded programming where you need to learn a lot of principles and a lot of language structures and data structures and algorithms. You would need some, but it's not as extensive as compared to other programming careers. And the future of web developers is bright. So think of it as how many things are being replaced by a website nowadays. For example, your calendar is replaced by something like Google Calendar or something else. Your to-do list is replaced by Google Keep or any other sort of online notes. Your document back in the day, or some people still use it, use Google Docs, but used to use sorry, Microsoft Docs or like Microsoft Word. But nowadays, more and more people started using online version of it or Google Docs to create presentation, and it's way much easier. Your newspaper is replaced by a website. There is no longer any physical newspaper, at least as far as I know. Your TV is also sort of replaced by your cable TV is also sort of replaced by websites like Netflix and YouTube and many others that provide you content or videos. And it's slowly growing more and more over time. So that being said, uh, where to start? Where should you start to become a web developer? Because there is a lot to learn. It's a growing market, and then there is a new technology every other day. Where should you start? Should you start with React, JavaScript? Should you start with learning data structures and algorithms? And should you start with like Vue.js or MongoDB or Python or whatnot? So in this video, I'll explain you most of the tools that are being used by web developers these days, and a study plan at the end that you can follow if you want to become a web developer. So first thing you want to do is figure out what would you like to do. So there are mainly two types of web developers. One is called the front-end web developer, and the other one is called the back-end web developer. The front-end web developer deals with the client side of the code, which means the website that you see, the part of a website that a user gets to see is called the front end or the client side. Whereas the part of the code or the part of all of the business where all of the business logic lives, which creates the server, it's called the backend side, which add more business logic to a web page. So a front-end web developer just only deals with whatever a user can see on a web page. They usually require skills such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, with some knowledge of UX, which is called user experience, so that your website enhances the experience of a user. user interface, which is more like how to place things, how to make your websites accessible to people with disabilities, and how to implement a good design. For this role, you need some sort of creativity and an eye for design. So you should be able to look more creatively on a web page and decide whether it is a good design or not. So, what exactly is HTML or HTML5, known as these days? So, think of a web page as a house, as a building house or making house. So HTML would play the role of foundation in your house. So in your house, you have your foundation, you have walls, then you have colors, and then at the end you have appliances where you just click a switch and your fan works or a light blinks or whatnot. So HTML works as that foundation. It is that structure of the whole website, and it is used to display content to the user. So it works as a skeleton. It provides a way so that a web developer can write something on a web page. It's super easy to learn. Most of the people, it hardly takes less than a day. And if you go to like a web developer interview, most probably they won't ask anything related to this because they know it's super easy to learn. And you can just Google it if you are stuck at it, and then there is no logic involved. So, how would a simple example of HTML code look like? This is what a sample website may look like. Don't worry about all of this. Basically, this is like the template. It's very static and you don't need to remember all of this. But what you need to see is it says H1, which means a heading, and hello world. So basically, what this web page will do is whenever a user enters, it will just print hello world. So, and that's a simple example. This website, it doesn't have any style. It doesn't have all of the beautiful colors that most of the website have. It just prints hello world on a white website in black fonts. So now, what is CSS? As I said, if a website is similar to building a house, CSS works as adding style to that house, adding paint, or adding more styling to it. That's why it's called cascading style sheet. So a simple example would be this. Basically, you select an HTML element and then you add color and a width. So in this case, it adds red color to the background and makes whatever the element is to 100% of the web page width. So that's what CSS is. CSS is pretty easy to learn and it's very beginner friendly. Yeah, it gets complicated when you try to make it more responsive or you have a complicated design to implement. But for a very simple website, CSS is really easy to learn. Now, let's move on to the functional part, which is called JavaScript. JavaScript is to add more interactivity to a web page. For example, a user would click on something and then this an element or maybe a button would just shine in or it would just disappear or all sort of different things that can happen. Or let's say someone clicks on something and you want to add an event, or so a person clicks on a button and the whole sidebar is hidden now, or something like this. So JavaScript lets you add interactivity in your web page. It lets you interact with the HTML. So it creates sort of a way so that you can change your HTML dynamically or whenever user do something. So that's really good. Um, it can also be used to send requests to server using asynchronous request, which is also known as AJAX. So think of Facebook when you load Facebook on your desktop and you go to the very bottom, it doesn't show all of the feeds, but it loads it in the background and then show you, and it sort of looks like an infinite scroll. But basically, what it is doing is the JavaScript is sending requests to the Facebook backend, and it's getting you more and more posts by your friends and other pages that you may like. Here is a simple example of how JavaScript look like. Basically, this will print "Hello world, JavaScript is awesome" in your developer console. More on that later. So that's where most of the front-end uh, developer stack may look like. That are the things that are must in order if you want to become a front-end web developer. Now, what if you want to become a full stack or a back-end web developer? So just to split or just to create a difference between front end and back end again. Backend is where all of your business logic lives in. Backend is where how you can make your web page dynamic. Backend adds more personality to your website. It can have more logic. For example, user login. You cannot do user login without having a backend because you need some sort of logic that sees if the user is present, has signed up in the web page. For example, adding a new post on Instagram has a backend that is waiting for you to upload a picture and then write a caption, and then it will store your post in a database, and that's where the backend side of Vertex that's what backend side of Vertex care of. So backend nowadays, it's very simple and easy to learn since there is a lot of YouTube videos and there is a lot of courses that you can take out there. So it's not as hard as it was. So that's a good thing. So, in order to become a backend web developer, you need to learn some programming languages, you need to learn some data structures and some algorithms. Mainly PHP. PHP is dominating the backend right now. Most of the websites that you use, most probably it's written in PHP, such as Facebook or any other website that you visit. There is a good chance it's written in PHP. Node.js is JavaScript, but in backend. It's a really good programming language, and it's highly used these days, and it's growing over time. And then there is .NET, Python, and Java. Java is not very beginner friendly for new web developers, and it is mainly used in like very high end and very highly used web pages such as Google Docs or like Amazon or something like that. So this is an example of a hello world in Java. That's how a Java template look like. Um, and a hello world example in PHP. PHP is pretty easy to learn. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's very flexible. And it's there is a lot of resources and the community is huge for PHP. So I would recommend learning PHP or Node.js for backend instead of like Java or something if you are pretty new to programming. Now, databases. What exactly is a database? So think of it as a way to store all of the data that a user or a user may have or your website may require. So, for example, think of Instagram. Whenever you add a new post, it should have some sort of database that accepts the person who added the post, number of people who liked it, what is your caption, did you add any location, did you mention someone? So you need some sort of database to store all of these things, and that's where the database part of web development comes in. So, as I said, is a place where web apps place their data. There are two types of databases, relational and non-relational database. Relational database is like an Excel sheet, as shown in this image, where you have rows and you have columns. And let's say in this case, it's a database of a company where it has all of the employees. So there is employee number, his or her name, age, the department he or she works at, and the salary. So that's how a sample database may look like. Now then there is another thing called a non-relational database in which you wouldn't have these rows and columns. Instead, you can have anything inside it, but it's not as fast as relational database and not highly used. but it's growing these days. So these are the two types of databases, and SQL or MySQL is the most famous one at the moment, or it's been famous since forever. An example would be MySQL. MongoDB is an example of a non-relational database. As I said earlier, data in a non-relational database doesn't need to have any relationship with each other. That's why it's called relational database. And then there is Oracle DB and SQLite as well, but MySQL is the biggest one. So as I promised, what should I do in order to become a web developer? How should my study plan look like? Now, this is not a master plan or like a plan that if you follow it, or you must follow it in order to become a web developer. You can do whole sort of different things, but this is at least what I followed. You should definitely start to think about where you want to go. Do you want to go in front end or back end? It's not a hard and fast rule. You can become a full stack developer, which I am right now, and you can do both of front end and back end. But most of the people end up choosing either front end or back end and then master either of the both. So if you want to become a front-end web developer or deal with more of the client side of the world, then you must learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in CSS, you should learn some sort of preprocessors once you learn the basic of CSS, like Sass. And once you have learned JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, that's the time you can start looking for job and learn some more tools in parallel, such as prototyping, Git. Git is actually a version control system. It is a tool used by programmers or designers or web developers or any other software developers to share their code with other developers and to control the version of their code. It's a really cool thing and it's highly used. If you'll become a web developer or any developer, there is a good chance you would use Git. So, highly recommend to learn Git. Then prototyping is more like making prototypes of how your web app may look like, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time actually creating it, and you can brainstorm more ideas and share it with more designers or developers or with your business team. As I explained earlier, UI and UX, there's no end to a UI and UX, and it keeps on changing. That's why I recommend learning it in parallel instead of first learning it and then start looking for a job. Now, backend. Backend needs a bit more skills, and it needs more practice and more programming in general. It needs HTML, some CSS, and not a lot of CSS knowledge is required. JavaScript is a must. Web developers or mainly backend web developers uses JavaScript all the time. Then, as I said, Git. Git is definitely required, and some sort of server-side knowledge. At least at least one server-side language is required, such as PHP or Node.js. I recommend starting with PHP or Node.js. You can learn Java, Python, .NET, and many other languages, but I recommend PHP or Node.js. And then learn some databases such as SQL, MongoDB. I recommend MySQL. Um, and some sort of like Oracle DB or SQL, or PostgreSQL, or you can learn Cloud SQL as well. But I would recommend starting with just MySQL in the beginning, and that's when you should start at least looking for jobs. So that's all. I would say good luck with learning web development. Hopefully you will enjoy it. Hit a like if you like the video. Thanks.